of Dhaka School of Economics will guide us through the session and safeguarding river rights. At the same time, I'd like to invite the panelists for this session, Ms. Farah Kabir, Country Director, ActionAid Bangladesh, Dr. Samia Salim, Professor and Director, Center for Sustainable Development, University of Liberal Arts Bangladesh, ULAB, and followed by this, there will be an online presentation from Mashiat Ronak Pritam, student, Bangladesh University of Professional. Can I have a big round of applause for the session and the panelists on stage?
আপনাদের চা খাওয়া হলে প্লিজ চলে আসেন। আমরা আশা করছি যে আমাদের যে প্রথম অধিবেশন, প্রথম সেশন, ওটা খুব আমাদের জন্যে ইন্টারেস্টিংও হবে, আবার চিন্তার খোরাকও যোগাবে এবং আমরা আলোচনাগুলোকে সামনে নিয়ে যাব। Friends who are joining us virtually, welcome back after the break. And this is the first thematic session, and we're looking to try and deepen our understanding on the nexus of climate change and the rights of the rivers. Now, I know that the concept of rights of the rivers isn't very old. Somehow we used to take rivers for granted, and it did flow, and civilizations, economies, everything grew around river, around water bodies, but we did not know how to respect. And therefore there has been huge encroachment on rivers. There has been attempts to try and control rivers. We often hear the conversation of river management, river control, but we do not think of rivers from a river centric approach. This session we are trying to understand rivers and also the link with climate change. Rivers are the veins of our planet, have sustained civilization for millennia. They quench our thirst, nourish our crops, and cradle a kaleidoscope of biodiversity. Oh God, there I am gone. Anyway, yet in the throes of a changing climate, these lifebloods are under siege. And they are under siege because the world's planet now, the Earth has 8 billion people, isn't it? And it's still that limited land, or land has been lost, water levels have been rising, and we're trying to accommodate that huge population here. Rising temperatures, erratic rainfall patterns, and melting glaciers are wreaking havoc on the river ecosystem. And this impacts communities the most, and communities that are vulnerable, and they are having to face crisis, are challenged regularly. And but what we found is communities are also the first responders, are most equipped, and have become resilient. For too long, rivers have been viewed as mere source of resource. This anthropogenetic approach has fueled unsustainable practices, and the vulnerability in the face of climate change has been exacerbated. A paradigm shift is underway. However, with the growing recognition of river rights, we feel that we need the legal framework, but first and foremost, we need an understanding, we need a behavioral change, and of course, policies and legal frameworks are important, but we have to change and respect rivers as an entities. And in 2019, Bangladesh High Court gave the judgment that rivers are a living entity. And Bangladesh is probably the second country. I think the first was New Zealand, then India, Bangladesh, and now there's a trend to recognize rivers as an entity with intrinsic value and the right to flow freely, free from pollution and sustain ecosystems they nourish. from the theory to practice. Now, I just want to make this intervention to get the discussions going, and we will talk about from theory to practice. We will talk about the road ahead, how protecting rivers in the face of climate change is not just an environmental imperative, but a human right necessity, and also for sustainable biodiversity for the existence of the planet. We are very fortunate that we have Dr. Khalikuzzzaman, who's an expert on water, and his publication. I went to his office the other day, and they have a library, and they were like a whole row full of books which were all written by him. It's amazing. I asked him, how do you do this? So with these few words, I hand it back over to Dr. Khalikuzzzaman to lead us through the session. We unfortunately have one speaker missing, Professor Nurul Islam. He's unwell, so he's not able to join. But the other speakers will be with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Farah Kabir, for inviting me to this conference, because the subjects being dealt with very dear to me, and I try not to miss these occasions. Now, in this session, I think we'll come down from the high pedestal where we were put by Imtiaz down to brass tacks and nuts and bolts issues. I think that's what, as an economist, that's the way I see things, that we have to understand the practicalities. Of course, we have to understand the philosophy and the debates among giants and so on for directions, overall directions. But then we have to understand the ground realities to be able to act. And I hope in this session we'll get some of those. So without any further observations from me, let's start the session. Who is speaking first? Okay, Samia Salim, please. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, yes. Somebody will be going to the presentation and the slides.
Hello, colleagues. Are you there? Someone operating the
Just,
slides?
I have nothing here to push.
Raise your hand, please. Are you there? Okay. Please take note, huh?
So, yeah, just wait. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Still good morning. Assalamu alaikum. I'm very pleased to be here as part of the 9th International Water Conference. It's really interesting because this is the 9th one, and what I read, it started in 2016, and that's really where my journey in Bangladesh working here also began, and I've been following it closely, and it's wonderful to be here. So I will be talking on this session, and again, just the topic climate change and rights of river. When I started thinking about that, I don't actively work on Rights of River, but I work closely on climate change, but they're so interlinked. So I decided to focus on more the approach and a bit of theoretical, but really grounding in the research work that I'm doing at ULAB at the Center for Sustainable Development, using a transdisciplinary approach, and why it's necessary to really explore these transboundary, transnational issues, whether it's river management, climate change, air pollution, and so on and so forth, to understand how do we bring about transformations in these systems and address the challenges that we're facing today. And to do that, I'll be using my work in the Sundarbans Delta, working on social resilience. Next slide. So as I said, the last 8 years I've been working along the mostly around the coast, but also in the river systems up north. But most of my work has been on addressing vulnerability and building resilience in coastal communities, addressing from livelihoods, adapting to climate change, gender issues, addressing equity and inclusion and such. So next slide. Next slide. I'm a marine ecologist, but I've been working a lot in the space of natural resource governance, political ecology, and grounded in sustainability science. Next slide. So, we've been hearing and we have already set the tone on climate change not just being, it's not a one-off issues, it's really about the systems change. And as we address these really interconnected socio-ecological challenges of not just, we're dealing with climate change in a very geopolitical situation, rapid, unplanned, unsustainable development, which again, things are happening at the global scale, but we're really feeling that impact here in Bangladesh at a very local scale. I mean, across the world, but here where I'm working with sea level rise, river erosion, intermingled with multifaceted aspects of poverty and governance issues. So to address these challenges, I'm going to talk from two of my projects. One is on Engage for Sundarbans, which is again a global partnership between India and Bangladesh on how do we address the gaps in knowledge and understanding on transboundary issues between the Sundarbans, managing and governance, adaptive governance in the Sundarbans. And the second one is a larger global project, which is actually with 12 countries, which addresses how do we move from vulnerability to viability or resilience in small-scale fishing communities. And through this, the approach has been, it's not just about resilience, equity, rights, decision-making, all of these are so integral when you're trying to tackle, it's not just a ecological, science problem. So it's really important that we address the wider political agenda, even in such grounded science-based research. Next slide. Very little. I mean, it's not so much about the Sundarbans itself, as we already know. It's the largest mangrove delta in the world. It provides a wealth of services to humankind, from ecosystem services, from food, fisheries, carbon sequestration, coastal defense, and such. But we also have to remember, like 177 rivers flow through, to the Sundarbans into the Bay of Bengal. So, you cannot tackle a specific ecosystem such as Sundarbans without addressing what's happening, not just, from the rivers flowing through Bangladesh, from India, and then how climate change is impacting that or having an effect on that. So even when we talk about rights of rivers, it's not, especially in the wake of climate change, we have to be thinking about it. You cannot just think of the boundary object. It's very much interconnected to wider to wider scales, to wider agendas. Even as we talk about rights, you have to bring in these other aspects of the threats, anthropogenic threats that we're facing: pollution, climate change, and unsustainable development. And even the linking these rights of rivers to these the strategic plans we have, or SDG goals, Delta Plan, and other global policies. You have to bring in, interconnect these issues. So that's really important. Next slide. So this project, this research that we're doing, is really from grounded, in two sites, in India and Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, it's in Ashashuni. In India, it's in Kumirmari. It's funded by the National Science Foundation, and it's to explore how, when we talk about resilience, or we talk about addressing partnerships and issues, how do you bring in the very local, very grassroots into that dialogue, into that platform? How do you do that? So this is really, that's what it's about: engaging those communities and how they are adapting, coping, and those nuanced stories of resilience and decisions people make. Next slide. this builds on from the India side. They have been working with inland fisheries. So again, working with fishing communities on how they have been using river systems so they use a lot of historical ecology, archival data to show how people. So this narrative of how people and rivers have been connected, from millennia. It's not a new thing. River management. People have been using and living and utilizing river systems for a long time. So understanding ground up from India side and from Bangladesh side, we have been, as I said, working with small scale fishers. So in the Sundarbans Delta, how they have impacted by different governance systems, by changes in governance, by changes in climate change, and we bring that together in this project. Next slide. So these are our two sites, and as we know, I can use this one. Oh, great. Trying. Go to, yeah. Focus. I Yeah. No, I'm not using. I just wanted to get to the next. Oh, got it. Okay, it is working, right? As you know, in the last many years, one of the impacts of climate change has been more frequency and extreme weather conditions, and particularly, in the where we are working, they have faced a series of cyclones over the last few years, impacting both sides a bit differently, and some more in intensity than others in different sides. But so we've been following the community since Ayla on the Kumimari side, and then on the Bangladesh side since Amphan. So more recent, our work, obviously others, building on what others have done, but particularly we have been seeing how people have been adapting and strategies they're using. Okay, I think it would have been better if somebody else. Sorry. Technology to. And one of the things that we have found is that a lot of the disaster risk reduction plans tend to focus on single disaster approach, so cyclones, cyclone shelters, early warning signals, which is, again, lauded successful. We have made progress, and on the India side, there's been a lot of work on people moving away from there, having a biosphere, making it a conservation focus place, and getting people to move out, like systematically as part of building resilience. But talking to people, we have been using we have published this paper on staying as climate change adaptation. So how people want to stay, why they want to stay, and how they have their own coping, adapting mechanism. We've been using deep ethnographic work in the last few years to talk to people, to see their way of life, how they have moved from, since the forest has been closed up, they moved to inland fishing. And I'm not saying they have the solutions, but they wanted more knowledge on how to do more inland fishing, how to use the resources. They already, have their ways, but it's not like they're closed off to talking to, researchers, academics, government. So how do we work with them to build on what they're already doing, rather than coming up with only top level policies on how people adapt in those areas? So we've been looking at multiple disruptive risks. And again, here our work during the Corona period, in Bangladesh for the fishing ban for 2 months following the Corona period, we've been closely working with these communities to come up with a multiple this was plural understanding and perception of multiple actors, right? So here the transdisciplinary approach is so important, because again, it's not just grounded up, it's also working with very local government, and that's really, we realize, another area that really needs to be strengthened, right? You have strong policies, you have grassroots strong voice, but that interface of local governance is still weak and needs to be strengthened. So that was, one of our findings from this work, that there are plural epistemologies. And the other thing we found from both sides is that it's very place-based and needs-driven. So not same, but similar to sites, facing these multiple disrupted risks, but how governance isn't different on both sides. Showed how they're adapting bottom up, and what their needs, how different their needs can be. So as I said, we've we've used a two-pronged method. We have first looked at historical, like that's the part I didn't do. Others who are historians, they did it. Books, and then it really goes back even further to how land and rivers and how all this, colonial period, how the changes, they also help us to add insight to the ethnographic work we're doing. So we're just in the right now bringing all this together, and hopefully we'll be sharing the data. And now going forward, based on what the community we're working with wanted, we're going to be experimenting. I want to say experiment, like it's not like we're just experimenting on them. They're going to focus on integrated farming in Bangladesh side and inland fishing on the India side, and we'll be following that journey as well over the next 1 year. This also builds up, as I said, the other work we've been doing with small-scale fishers. Again, I'm not going to go into the different studies we have done the last 3 years, but end of the day, it's really, again, bringing on that transdisciplinary, working with multi-stakeholders. We can keep on publishing, and we publish with this knowledge, but it can't stop there. We have to. So this is what our, if you keep it simple, but keep it exactly what people need. We know they need to have a livelihood option, and people are working on that. But this easy government loan systems and having access to finance, people shy away from working on that solution. How do we safety equipment? Yes, there's cyclone warnings, but a lot of these fishermen talk about having more low tech GPS that they can use on the boat. So why aren't we innovating on some of these? And here again, we need to be working with different, you can see the different kind of sectors that needs to be working to address this, right? There's the legal aspect as well on fisher ID recognition, strengthening value chain. So, and of course our work on recognition of women involved in the small scale fisheries. So all this just really shows that you do require such a transdisciplinary approach to address these challenges that are faced by communities. And lastly, go forward. This thing is, yeah. So we're just like now, bringing all this from the India side and Bangladesh side to look at it from a adaptive governance lens, and working. There's the MOU between Bangladesh and India on managing transboundary Sundarban. So how do we add value to that? What can we contribute to that? So we want to start having more. So obviously we're sharing between India and Bangladesh, between our farmers and our fishers, but take it to the next level and bring more local government folk together to address some of the things that have come out from this research, and take it up to at the end in another year, have an international workshop between Bangladesh, India, and other actors on what kind of governance, interactive, adaptive governance needed to manage these transboundary issues. So watch this space. In another year and a half, we hope to get there. So this is really, I didn't go through obviously the methods or our findings, but I just want to highlight if a key message is from this that to address this topic. And when Farapa talked about rights of river and linking it in with to address that and linking that to climate change, we need to be having such a more inclusive, more integrated approach, and bringing in different stakeholders so that we can connect these equity, rights, environmental, and social issues in this very complex, global issues that's shaping our local lives and systems. So that's for me. Thank you very much. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
thank you. Take your seat. We have had the first presentation. We have another presentation. I think that's online, right? আছে নাকি না?
Honorable professors, delegates, attendees, Assalamu alaikum. This is Mashed Ronak Pritam from Bangladesh University of Professionals, accompanied by my friend Emily Tasim Raihan from Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology in today's 9th International Water Conference 2024. The title Water, River, Climate Change, Creating Space for Resilience, Climate Change, and River Risk Vulnerabilities is the subtype that our topic goes to. Understanding and assessing water-related climate risks and vulnerabilities, coastal flood projection of Bangladesh. So let's get started. So there is the table of contents. You can see the research background, motivation, methodology, resumes and discussions, and results and discussions, references, research background and motivation. So let's get started. So we know that flooding is among the most serious dangers of all global risks and causing of life, loss of life, damage and property, livelihoods and economies. Flooding is likely to intensify in the coming decades due to climate change. Despite of these dangers, flood risks are often underestimated and poorly managed due to lack of data and actionable information, particularly in less developed countries like Bangladesh. So here is a projection model by IPCC. This projection model gives us the information that the sea level rise is going to increase by day. The IPCC has used CMIP6 model for Southeast Asia. We see that the projections in 2020 from 2036 is some of greater about 0, and in the next stages it surpasses that level to 0.5 meter and will pass through 1 meter in the upcoming times due to climate change, which is a matter of concern. So the research area is based on the coastal area of Bangladesh. We have created this map using ArcGIS, and you can see the districts Khulna, Bagerhat, and other regions, Patuakhali, and Bhola, other regions which are to the southern Bangladesh, and this denotes the effect of coastal inundation, salinity intrusion, erosion, subsidence, and etc. So this will be the part of our focus, and the projections will be based on this coastal flooding due to climate change. So coming to the methodology, here is the visuals projections provided by the literature review we did and the tools flood adequates we use. In the 2030 projection, we have seen a current pattern, a small pattern. The 2050, the pattern grows, and 2018, it goes to another level. So here is the legend, like the inundation depth is given in decimeters. From that, you can see that the gradual increase of the areas. We have worked in a micro scale in here, like the tool is for a mesoscale. Like if we are planning to work in each grids, for that we have to collect data for properly assessing and monitoring each districts in the future. So here is the methodology. Here is the formula. You can see the C total, I total, and I total. Here I is the impact, C is the change of impact from baseline, and the impact of the drivers individually, and the change of climate from baseline total, and other impacts, climate change. By implementing this, we have implemented a ratio. From this ratio, on the next slides, we will see the graphical visuals, which will make more sense. So here is another formula, the final annual cost. The formula is used by adding annual investment cost, annual maintenance cost, 1 plus discount rate and year sequence. You can learn more about this in the main paper with all references given. Like in here, the Huizenga et al. 2017, we use this formula to estimation of economic damage, y equals to ax to the power b, where y stands for construction costs, x is GDP by capita, and a and b are constants. And the next slides, we will see the visualizations, the in-net meaning of this, the result and analysis part. So this part is very important. So the papers and the tool. So this is the part, the first part, the annual affected population is given. We see that in 2010 and 2030, 2050, 2080, the projections are going like in the higher trend. this is due to climate change. So due to climate change, the amount of affected population will increase. The number of climate migrants will increase. In this next graph, we have incorporated climate change factors such as climate, socioeconomic factors, subsidence, and other factors. They also will increase due to climate change. The number of climate mitigated migrants will ultimately increase. So here's the important part where we talk about the GDP. We are seeing that the amount of GDP US dollars, the effect of the coastal flood is directly on the GDP, which will create a great amount of pressure on the government, because this fund, we have international donors and other organizations contributing. So if we can implement these kinds of projection models, we can implement the fund more effectively. So the annual expected damage we see, which is increasing 2010, 2030, 2050, 2080. Urban asset value is also increasing, and other summaries that are also in an increasing manner. So the loss probability curve, we in our model, we have implemented 3 models: high level rise model, medium level rise, and low level rise. If we plot these models, we will see that the models, based on their activities or functions, they give a different type of estimates on the damage eventually in 2030, 2080, and 2050, and the average is given in a black shade. We can learn more about this from the papers and references. So here are another with affected population relation. So here is a pitch, like the implementation of projects, where we can implement our projects. So this is an important, because if our project has no implementation idea, there is no need of such kind of projects. So yeah, here you can see that the ideas are given here. Here is the research part of our project, the disaster risk management of our project, like hazard mapping, vulnerability mapping. This can contribute to the National Adaptation Plan of Bangladesh, like the building of the disaster budget, nationally determined goals, which play an important part in Paris Agreement. If we can monitor and assess, we can implement, and we can play a role by the NDCs we want to implement. The mitigation, where we mitigate or remediate the problem, and adaptations, while in forms of infrastructure change in those areas, setting up priorities, and district-wise planning, which is decentralization. And here we can see the projections we have created from our work, like the GDP loss, socioeconomic, urban damage, affected population, assessment and monitoring. By using this, we can assess coastal erosion, saltwater intrusion, and inundation, and other impacts of rivers also. So in the agricultural field, we can use, like in those areas we have seen in the slides, for flood tolerant variants, cultivation, and salinity tolerant variants, and eventually we can work and we can give instruction to the Bangladesh Rice Research Institute and other research organizations with agriculture, according to the projections, that what steps they should take for the agriculture. The decentralization uses community training, carbon plans, and relief and distribution plan. Like if you can project these things, you can implement these types of activities for early warning, emergency responses, volunteer management. So basically, if we can implement this project in what should I say, a micro scale, like the coastal regions, and based on zilas and districts, we can carry out many activities which are not possible centrally by the government. We can decentralize, we can modify our national adaptation plan, we can empower people, the volunteers, the relief fund distribution. We can bring some sort of harmony out of it, which will be helpful for the disaster risk management of coastal areas. So Apart from this, that was our presentation. So thank you for listening to us. So here are the details. Our email addresses are given. Feel free to ask us any question. And here are the references. You will find in detailed references in the main paper. So thank you guys. Thank you for listening to us.
থ্যাংক ইউ মার্শিয়াত এখন কি প্রশ্ন উত্তর না ওকে কারো যদি কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকে তাহলে একজনই আছে এখানে সামনে উত্তর দেওয়ার জন্যে বন্ধ হয়ে গেছে দেখলাম কথা নাই
So we are up for the question and answer. So if there's any question online, we can leave that for us. We will convey. And here we have one question from Miss Mansi. Let's see what she has to say.
Thank you. Thanks for all this presentation. Both the presentations were nice. I have a question to you, Samia. When now you're working in India and Bangladesh, and I'm very curious because I'm going to start a project between the two countries. The basic governance difference that you find in managing the coastal ecosystem and especially the climate-related disaster. I mean, we know that people can manage themselves to a large extent, but I'm more curious on the governance side of the government, not the governance of the people. Yeah, thanks.
Hello, thank you. I am Tania Noor. I am from Involid. So my question is also for Samiappa. That is like you mentioned about easy government loan. What about insurance? Why loan? Why? What is the main objective of easy government loan? Is it a viable option or insurance policies? Thank you.
Thank you, both of you. Actually, this is very nice presentation. I have also question to Dr. Samia. So far, I understand that this study conducted jointly India and Bangladesh. So, any specific recommendation after that study, then that will be maybe helpful for us. That is for next step. I am Poitus Chandra Sarkar from World Vision.
Thank you for the questions. I'll just go, from the beginning. So in answer to your question on the difference between governance, I can't really comment too much on government. Because at the only on from understanding from there on local governance. That one thing we found was that on the India side, that the local governance or government also were much stronger. The panchayat systems and the local representation. They had a stronger voice. They were more vocal on their demands. So same thing. Both wanted stronger embankments. The issues both facing after a cyclone, inundation, both. But how the community from India side is getting their voice across in Kumirmari through that. It also helped Kumirmaris under one panchayat, under those everything, which is one. Whereas here in Ashashuni, it's not just it's a bit more complex. But the same issue on when you talk about governance on who really gets to get relief or social protection or any of the permission to go to the forest, same thing faced on both sides. Corruption, who can get the passes, who can get the passes to go into the forest for honey collection and others. On the India side, though, the NGO work, the local NGO, not I'm talking about international development or anything, they were raising the CSOs. They were raising the voice of the honey collection, so they're able to sell the organic honey. The villages were involved, but they raised their voices to make sure that they don't have to just give it to the forest patrollers or to the that they could do it. Whereas on the Bangladesh side, at least from the people we talked to, there's a lot more work to be done on the advocacy work, not livelihoods. So a lot of NGOs working on that, but getting the voice. We found it stronger on the India side. That was one. Government and issues, I'll refrain from commenting on that, but we could have a side conversation. Your question, that's a really interesting one. So what I meant, loans and not insurance, because two separate things. With the loans, we've seen a lot of they're indebted to the dadons, so like the fishermen, they don't have the capital. So there's 6 of them. They're not even, some of them don't have fisher ID. They're just helpers on the boat, but they are fishermen. They have been for generations. They borrow money, from the middleman to for the boat, the nets, the use of the boat of somebody else. And those loans I'm talking about, they can't access formal loans because it's not like they're wanting relief work. This is for their business, for their but they don't have that capital. They only have to borrow from these middlemen. So, if they could access more formalized, that they said they can't. Yes, not from. Yeah, absolutely. Would love to hear more about that. But the one I'm referring to is so that they don't have to take from. They're not so indebted to the Mahajans and the Dadons. The insurance is another aspect we are looking at, not with Engage, but as I said, with the V2 on what kind of. So right now there's farmers insurance, but not for fishers, which is definitely something we would love to. We need to do, but so two separate things. So loan is for the debt, and the insurance is for more risks as we're facing. The last question was about the findings. I mean, there's many, as you said, many levels of findings, but one thing was salinity is more here, less over there, so they're able to do few other things, but there was more innovation on the Bangladesh side, different. So the integrated farming bits that, we spoke to farmers there, they were really fascinated to do some of that. But the common things like embankment issues was common to both. But happy to share more nuanced finding both in the, ecological options for livelihoods as well as governance issues, as it comes out. One thing we found out, any of the archival data is all on the India side. It's so difficult to, I guess, all the museums and libraries they're hosted, so we find it really difficult to access. India side, that's a Hamada side and Nai. But so many stories of everybody over there all have it's again, even that was so different how how they worship. Even it was fascinating to learn that. But all the people over there have families on the Bangladesh side. They were so connected to the land on this side because they're from here, and they were so happy to meet us from Shamnagar because they have so really, really interesting insights, from the ground up.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Ji. I have a question. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Samia, for your nice presentation and your work. We know in Bangladesh there are the 65 days ban. You have already mentioned in your slide more support is needed. The fishermen ban is 65 days. They are restricted to fishing in the Bay of Bengal due to the conserving the fishes. Have you seen any difference in India? It stopped 20 June. And in Bangladesh, the ban period stops 1 month later. It's 23 July or near about that. Have any dissatisfaction about it to the fishermen? Because 1 month only India is catching fish in the Bay of Bengal, and we are thinking we are conserving fish. In this way, how have any recommendation on it, or what are the dissatisfaction, and what should I want to know? Thank you.
Thank you for the presentations. This question is directed to both the presenters. I was wondering about human-induced climate change, like salinity. At one time, because of the like prawn cultivation, there was more salinity in Khulna, and also pollution, like plastic pollution, etc. So I know it's not climate change per se, but human-induced climate change. And are your studies, both the presenters, do your studies cover any of these aspects? And because there may be recommendations for the policymakers on these human-induced climate change. Thanks.
আমি একটু বাংলায় বলতে চাই, আপা একটু ইংলিশে বলে দেবেন। আমাদের বাংলাদেশের একদম দক্ষিণ অঞ্চলে সেই সুন্দরবন থেকে শুরু করে একদম আমাদের কুয়াকাটা, কলাপাড়া বা এই অঞ্চল থেকে প্রত্যেকটা জায়গায় একটা সময় ছোট ছোট অনেক নদী ছিল, নদী খাল অনেক এইভাবে, কিন্তু বাঁধার জন্য অনেক নদী একদম মরে গেছে, হয়তো একটু আছে, তার ভিতরে ধান চাষ করছে। তো সেইটা যেমন এই কিছুক্ষণ আগে আমি আমাদের মন্ত্রী মহোদয়ের সাথে এই বিষয়টা নিয়ে আলাপ করলাম। তো এইরকম জিনিস আপনার কলকাতার বা ইসেও মনে হয় আছে, যেহেতু পরিবেশগত একই। তা আপনারা আসলে এই সমস্যাগুলো কিভাবে সমাধান করছেন, সেইভাবে আমরা ফলো করতে পারি কিনা সেটা নিয়ে একটা প্রশ্ন। আপনাদের ওখানে প্রবলেমগুলো আছে মনে হয়, এবং থাকলে কিভাবে সমাধান হচ্ছে?
অনলাইনে কে আছে?
আমাদের প্রেজেন্টার যিনি অনলাইনে ছিলেন, আপনার কাছে একটা প্রশ্ন ছিল, আপনি কি শুনতে পেয়েছেন? Oh, they're not present. Okay. Oh, was it recorded?
I'm trying to remember the first. So the first question was, yes, about the ban. Yes, so much complaints from. There is tension because it's the Bangladesh fishermen who are, finding it very unfair, because if it's about conservation of the species, and it should be for this. The ecosystem is the same. Here again, that whole transboundary, transnational waters. Like, why is that? But it's hard to know. So it is. They do a lot of complaints, and we've written about this. But then they also talk about, like, during different winds, they're scared to their boats get crossed over to the India side, and then their boats get seized. So it seems, but this is of course biased because we've only been talking to the Bangladesh fishermen about the fishing ban more. I'm sure there's the other side too, but I can't speak on what grievances they have on the fishing ban. But one of the things was also not just the unfairness of, why not the same time, but the people from the Sundarbans, why is it a blanket ban? If you're trying to follow the ecology, of the hill and their, roots, like how much of is happening in like that part of the water is still, they question that as well. So I guess this has to be, matched with actual ecological, biological studies on what's happening with the species. So that, again, how much do we know about the stocks, about changes? This brings out a lot of question. But from their side, a lot of complaints about that. The other question was about. So the pollution, it's interesting because on the India side, they complained about that more. I don't know if it's because they're closer to Kolkata, or they're more aware, or there's more work from the government on controlling pollution, but there was a lot more awareness. They used less plastics than, whereas in our side we're seeing a lot more, and there's less. They weren't aware how bad it is. Let's put it that way. They were seeing the plastics, they were seeing the pollution, but they weren't complaining about that being the biggest problem for that. From the outsider, yes, to us, you could see it is, but not ground up. That didn't come up. The shrimp farming, it's again so different on both sides. We did not have this trajectory of development on salinity human-induced salinity increase due to the shrimp farms, which is very much more on the Bangladesh side than on the India side. That was very, very stark. Even the landscape was very different when you go to Shatkhira Shamnagar and equivalent to that on the other side. So one would have to, really analyze that to understand some of these human-induced impacts of salinity. And of course, then we talk about rivers being diverted again, and salinity increasing from that. So there's a lot of human-induced issues that I think is more relevant to Bangladesh side, to my understanding. So very little about that, but what we have found, one of the things we've seen doing the shadowing the farmers before our experimentation will start there is that informally people have been doing aquaculture on the banks of the rivers or catching, but it's been very it's just so small anecdotes and informal, so we're trying to understand that a bit more, I'm not doing this, but other researchers in my group are using cooperative flexible cooperative models of such to understand how people are have been utilizing parts of the river for their, but nothing concrete that I can give any conclusion now. Oh.
So let me start by thanking Farah Kabir. She made the first presentation, and then Samia Salim, Mashiat Pritam, and those of you who have asked questions, and also those of you who have not asked questions. I thank all of you for a start. Then I'll try to make a few remarks, not too many. I don't think I'll go into much details. First of all, of course, Farah Kabir mentioned that there is a court ruling in Bangladesh. You mentioned, right? In 2019. 2019, that rivers are entities and the rivers have rights. And many other countries, we have those kinds of rulings. But one ruling by a Colombian court I like most. They said the rivers have rights to protection, conservation, maintenance, and restoration. It's all there. You have to protect it, conserve it, maintain it, and restore it when it's not properly maintained. But are we doing any of those in this country and in other countries? That's the question we'll have to ask ourselves. And our actions will depend if we can take action. Often enough, we cannot take action. Although we know the problem, but action is not forthcoming for various reasons. Now, climate change. The climate has 5 components, I'm sure all of you know. One is land, cryosphere, ice, biosphere, all living things, atmosphere, the envelope around the earth, and hydrosphere, water. Now, it's all human-induced climate change. That is, it could be natural, but it's not natural now, we know. What's happening today, or has been happening over the last, I don't know how long, starting from the first industrial revolution. It's a human-induced climate change. That's what we are bothered about. And this is something that we are trying to address. We have been trying to address. Now, climate change is primarily a water issue, essentially, because the impact of climate change falls on water or through water to various sectors, because we need water for agriculture, for industry, for navigation, for human living. Life, water is life. Therefore, and also climate change changes the pattern of rainfall, and that creates havoc in many countries. It has done. You have floods, you have drought, all water related, and even wildfires. You want to quench that, you need water. And it's happening in the first place because of lack of water. So water is at the center of climate change and its and how you address the climate change. Now, of all the water that's available, I think all of us know that, on Earth, only 0.5% is usable and available as fresh water. And that's enough still for all the people that we are on the globe. I don't know in future what might happen because water is getting polluted. And actually, fresh water is about 2%, right, Afsan? About 2%. But most of it is stuck in ice and permafrost and so on, and also saline water. And therefore, fresh water available is very little. And another fact, I think, this is one of the important facts that we should remember, that we can't waste water. We can't allow it to be polluted because the number of people in the world is increasing and in countries also increasing. And water is getting polluted very much. So usable water, available and usable water, that's becoming less and less, and demand is becoming more and more. So this is a real critical issue. One other fact is vulnerability to flood globally. It's now 1.2 billion people, and it's going to increase to 1.6 billion by 2050. Probably by 2050, we'll be about 9 billion people. So it's 1/8 or 1/7 of the population will be vulnerable to flood. And then, of course, vulnerable to drought, vulnerable to other aspects of that. So that's global. Now, when you come to Bangladesh, when I talk about either development or climate change, an issue of development, or anything else about Bangladesh, I recall three things. I think these are the critical three elements. One, the location, geographical location of Bangladesh. It's very vulnerable. We are at the bottom of three major river systems, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, the Meghna. And we have no control over water, particularly during the dry season. Water is withdrawn upstream, and we get very little. And during the rainy season, water comes down to us. 92% of the water that flows through Bangladesh comes from outside. Only 8% is generated within the country. So that's the kind of vulnerability that Bangladesh faces in relation to water. Second thing is that we have very long coastal belts. There's about 710 kilometers. So we are vulnerable from there. From the sea level rise, sea level is rising, salinity ingress is happening and is coming into the country more and more. And therefore the coastal belt is very, very vulnerable to salinity. And the third thing is population, size of population. Per square kilometer in Bangladesh, we have how many? 1,200 per square kilometer. 1,200 in Bangladesh. Huh? 1,200, around 1,200. See, there are two figures. One is if you take out the water bodies, and if you include the water bodies, there will be two figures. So let's say it's about 1,200. In India, it's about 450. Pakistan, 300. Thailand, 140. China, 150 per square kilometer. United States of America, 36. Canada, 4 per square kilometer. Russia, 9. And Australia, 3.5. So where we are, 1200 per square kilometer. So you have to address all the issues for 1200 people per square kilometer. So these three things really are very big constraints on Bangladesh's development. And particularly with respect to climate change, of course, these are real big issues. So we have to deal with other issues, but all the time, these are defining the extent of actions that we may be able to take. Now, if we come to policies and actions, with respect to, I made a presentation a few months ago in Parliament to the parliamentarians, not in Parliament, but in the oath room. And doing a bit of research, I found there are 26 policies or laws with respect to climate change and water management, Bangladesh. But they have been enacted by various ministries. They are not coordinated anywhere. Nobody knows what, no ministry or no agency knows what are the contents in the policies or acts enacted by other ministries. So there is no coordination about that. But we have said in these laws and policies everything that needs to be said. But this is not coordinated by any ministry. For example, climate change negotiation, the energy ministry is not on board. And how can you discuss climate change without energy? That's not on board, they don't participate. And there has not been much attempt in the past, as far as I know, because I was the coordinator for up to 2016 of climate change negotiations of Bangladesh. And there was very little attempt. I tried, but somehow the ministries, they don't see eye to eye on issues. Therefore, they don't come abroad. We were able to get the foreign ministry on board though, but not energy ministry. And it hasn't happened since. So how do you address climate change without energy ministry? Now, remaining on water, we have a water policy, 1919. I was a party to that actually, when it was drafted. And then a Water Act, 2019. Both of these, there is one element I'd like to mention, the water users' participation in project management, in project implementation. And sometimes we told in planning also, but that never happened. But there were attempts made to involve water users in implementation, but it's no longer there. There were attempts. So unless the people who are going to be affected and who are being affected participate, can say they're part of the story, how can you get a policy or a program which will address all the real issues? And that's what I said, nuts and bolts issues. How do you do that? You can't. We think that we know everything sitting somewhere in Dhaka, either in air-conditioned or not in an air-conditioned room. But when you go down to the villages and to the people, you find out completely different things, which I have done over the last 5 or 10 years. I have traveled throughout the country. I've talked to the people. I understood their real problems and tried to solve some of them within my capacity when I was in PKSF. But obviously, you could not do all the things that you would like to do. Now, okay, participation is one thing. Second thing is, there are no priorities. You see, we have not established priorities, which actions to be taken now, which action tomorrow, which action the day after. We know we have a list of actions, a whole list of actions there. But which one first, which one second? On climate change, Bangladesh spends from its own budget over $5 billion a year. it's maybe 6 billion now, 1.5% of our GDP. And we receive very little from outside. The estimated amount is about 1 billion a year. So it's 6 billion. And we spend those monies on various projects, but without priorities set. This I have tried, but I could not get very far in setting priorities. Because the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, which was formulated in 2009, July, has recently been reconstructed. I was the coordinator, the first one and also the second one. We have tried to give ideas, but you see, it's not the purpose to give concrete projects, a strategy. You decide strategy, not actions actually. So this has been with the government for some time now. Hopefully it will be finalized very soon, and then we'll know what changes have taken place since 2009 and now. We try to make it as up to date as possible, and what actions we could now take and what priorities could be set. But these are ideas there, but actual priorities must be set by the people who will undertake projects and implement projects. Now, last thing that I'd like to mention is that we have rivers, right? How many? 800, 700? We don't know. Do we know how many rivers we have? 850. So there are other numbers.
That's the point.
Huh?
National River Conservation Commission published a book.
How many?
It's almost 1,008.
1,000. We see there are various figures going, and there are some six.
River Commission claims there's
800.
800.
Right. There are other figures is 600 because some of the rivers have died. But anyway, large numbers of rivers, right? Okay. And National River Commission now that mentioned, River Conservation Commission was supposed to be. Some years ago, they published in newspapers the number of encroachers, 50,000 encroachers of rivers in Bangladesh. And most of these people were known to those who matter, those who can take action, but no action has been taken. So do we need to discuss water? Do we need to discuss river anymore? Thank you very much.
স্যার কিন্তু ফাঁকি দিল, অনেক অল্প কথায় সেরে দিল। আমরা আরো অনেক কথা শুনতে চাচ্ছিলাম। Given that he has been part in the last 50 years of Bangladesh, working on water, his publication and research. But I think he ended on a very important note. Do we really respect our rivers? And if we have over 50,000 encroachers, what's the value of rivers and water bodies to us? আমরা কি এখনো বুঝতে পারছি কি না যে আসলে নদীর আমাদের জীবনে কি গুরুত্ব, এবং নদীর রক্ষা, নদী পর্যালোচনা করা বা নদীর জন্য কাজ করা, এটা কি আমরা বুঝি কিনা, সেটাও কিন্তু আমাদের হয়তো এই 2 দিনের আলোচনায় চলে আসবে। সো আমি শুধু মাইকটা নিলাম প্রফেসর ডক্টর QK আহমেদকে ধন্যবাদ জানাবার জন্য। আমি খুবই আনন্দিত যে আপনাকে আমরা পেলাম। আমাদের কিন্তু মন ভরেনি, সো আমাদের আলোচনা চলতে হবে আপনার সঙ্গে, আরও কথা শুনতে হবে। থ্যাংক ইউ Samia for, you just got back the day before and you participated, and thank you to our online presenters as well. And now over to you.
Thank you so much, Appa. Heartfelt thanks to the moderator and the panelists of the inspiring session. Your commitment to this topic discussed is truly commendable, and we appreciate your valuable insights. Moving on, Mr. Afsan Chaudhuri, professor at BRAC University, will moderate the next session, delving into climate to you, Ms. Farah Kabir.
I'm not going to sing, so just hang in there. And I'm sorry, apologies যে আমাকে বারবার ওরা নিয়ে আসতেছে কেন যেন আমার কলিগরা মনে করছে যে একটু একটু বলে শুরু করে দেওয়া so this is an interesting session. It's on climate change and rivers, risk and vulnerabilities. Afsan bhai, please. Do we have anyone else? Hafiz? Hafiz, please join the panel. হ্যাঁ তুমি আগে বসো আমি নিশ্চয়ই তোমাকে দিয়ে দেব so this is about risks, rivers and vulnerabilities, and we've been talking since morning about climate change and the risk and how water is a vital element, climate impacts, transboundary issues, and the need to recognize and be proactive about river, all issues around river, whether it is pollution, whether it's rain or encroachment, and we need to have a comprehensive understanding. Because why do we need to have a comprehensive understanding? Because of the vulnerabilities of the communities in the front line. Just now, Professor Ahmed mentioned that we have the longest coastlines. That means that number of people are vulnerable, women, young people, and they are going through the shocks and stresses that are being caused by repeated disasters because of climate change. And so we need to have them at the center of any research we do, and at ActionAid, that's how we got involved in this whole discourse of climate change. The threats climate change poses. In fact, in 2007, I, for the first time, went to the climate negotiations. And in 2007, Afsan Bhai did a film for us, Who Cares If Bangladesh Drowns? I think that was one of the first videos showing the vulnerabilities of Bangladesh and its communities as being on the front lines of the coastal areas and climate change. And that video did get discussed by policymakers at the climate conference. I think the awareness levels started rising from there. And then from 2007 to 2023, in the climate processes, we have been very engaged to bring in the issues of loss and damage, because we wanted to talk a lot about historical responsibility. We want to talk about differentiated responsibilities. But in the negotiations, as you know, there are big countries, there are Annex 1 countries, and then the rest of the world. And in those spaces, it has been very difficult to talk about responsibility and compensation. So it was shifted to take on a shape of loss and damage. And so one of our speakers who's been very involved has been engaged from the government side and has worked hand in hand with also Professor Salimul Haq, who I would like to remember and pay my respects, who was one of the champions on climate justice and also loss and damage. So we will hear from all of them. And now I hand it over to Afsan Bhai to guide, to enlighten us. So over to you, Afsan Bhai.
Yeah. Thank you. Very happy to be here for meeting Professor Khaliquzzzaman. আমি 1987 আমি ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের উপরে প্রথম প্রেজেন্টেশন করেছিলাম, সেটা খালিকুজ্জামান স্যারের বাংলা 1987, ইয়েস, সেটা ছিল ওই বাংলাদেশ উন্নয়ন পরিষদ বলে ওনার একটা সংস্থা ছিল সেখানে। আর সেই সময় লোকজন আমাদেরকে পাগল বলতো, আমরা যারা ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ নিয়ে কথা বলতাম। And I was working for the UN at that time, so you can understand how much of a denial we are in. And secondly was the film, which ActionAid funded, supported, did everything possible. And the most, যখন আমরা প্রথম এই বিষয়টা তোলা শুরু করলাম যে আমাদের এই অঞ্চলে যাদের কথা ও বলছিল যে গরিব মানুষের যে দুনিয়া, সেই দুনিয়ার মানুষেরও ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ আছে, বিকজ আই ওয়াজ ভেরি offended by the discussion about how it is affecting the West. And still, even now, climate change is seen as something which is affecting the West. It is not seen as something which is affecting the world. And we have not been able to influence it. So I have limited confidence in advocacy, but nevertheless, it probably goes on. These are the background. And I remember after showing that film, I was in Canada at that time, and I got a lot of invite. In fact, the US invited me to show that video all around. But what you could see is the denial that, yeah, great, they are suffering. Let's give them some money. The managing climate change will mean addressing it at different levels. So mega level এ আমরা কতটা কি করতে পারবো আমি জানি না, মিড লেভেলে সরকার লেভেলে কি করতে পারবো তো যারা আজকে প্রেজেন্টেশন করলেন তাদের থেকে দেখলেন যে সরকার সিরিয়াস কিনা, আমি জানি না সরকার সিরিয়াস কিনা। তৃতীয়ত হচ্ছে এই মাঠ পর্যায়ে যে মানুষগুলো আছে যাদের রুজিটা হচ্ছে প্রধান বিষয়, যেই গবেষণাতে প্রতিটা গবেষণাতে উঠে আসে, তারা ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ বোঝে না, রিস্ক অ্যানালিসিস বোঝে না, নদী বোঝে না, তারা রুজি বোঝে। তো আমাদের এই যে 3 পর্যায়ের যে ব্যবস্থাগুলো, এগুলো আমরা কতটা নিতে পারছি তার উপরেই। তো এখানে আমরা কথা বলাটা খুব ভালো, কারণ এটা হচ্ছে ভিত্তি, কিন্তু এর প্রভাবটা কতদূর যাচ্ছে সেটা আমরা এখনও কিন্তু বলতে পারি না যাচাই না করলে। আমার কাছে খালিকুজ্জামান স্যারের কথা শুনে মনে হচ্ছে না খুব পৌঁছায়। আর আমার মনে হয় 6 বিলিয়ন যেটা কথা উঠছে সেটা আমি টিআইবির ওই মিডিয়া প্যানেলে দেখতে, ওদের করাপশনের মিডিয়ার যে ছিল সবচেয়ে বেশি করাপশন হচ্ছে ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জের যে টাকাটা আসে ওটাই। ইনফ্যাক্ট এতই করাপশন রিপোর্ট আসে যে পরে একটা আলাদা সেকশন খুলে দেওয়া হলো যে শুধুমাত্র করাপশন ইন ক্লাইমেট চেঞ্জ রিলেটেড ইস্যুস। অর্থাৎ এই বাস্তবতাগুলো আমাদের আছে, পছন্দ অপছন্দের বিষয় এটা না। তো আমি আর কথা বাড়াবো না। I will just move on to, you want to do it first, right? And what's your name? Hafizul Islam Khan. Okay. So I'll invite Hafizul Islam Khan, Director, Center for Climate Justice, Bangladesh, to make his presentation. Then we go into the, do we hold the questions or? So if we have a question, that will be followed by him. Right. Thank you.
Can I have my slides? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yes. Thank you, Afsar bhai. Good afternoon, colleagues and friends. Basically, I would like to talk about the ecological loss and damage, very complex issue. And I'm trying to involve the governance issue related to transboundary water management particularly. So the main key points, my first point is the governance challenge. You know, the bilateral or regional or international governance is a big challenge, but why? Very simply, sovereignty. Every state is the sovereign state. So this sovereignty is the strength, at the same time is very weak for natural resource management. However, we need to accept this sovereignty, but still we need to promote the cooperation, because global international policies or treaties cannot compel any sovereign states to act. Unfortunately, even there is International Court of Justice, you know, if both of the parties are not agreed, you cannot bring a case before the International Court of Justice. But currently there is a nice initiative. The states are seeking for advisory opinion from International Court of Justice for state responsibility for climate change. Also Gaza, right? Same case. So with that said, second complexity is the ecological loss and damage. Very complex issue. First of all, you need to assess what sort of ecological loss and damage you are facing or you're gonna face. The first and foremost important is that you need to develop right set of tools and methodologies. That's a big challenge. Once you can identify the tools and methods, then you need to identify the right approaches to deal with this sort of loss and damage. That is second challenge. But you know, the community is the best actor for this, because community knowledge, traditional knowledge, and of course indigenous knowledge is very important. You need to involve these communities even when you are going to assess the nature of the loss and damage. You need to involve these communities when you are going to address those loss and damage with effective measures. So community needs to be part of the decision making process, also in the implementation process. With that said, third issue is the climate change impacts. What I said, the transboundary governance is always a challenge. Now, climate change impacts is an additionality. What does it mean? Due to transboundary river management, we do face the ecological loss and damage due to scarcity of water and water pollution, for example. Now, climate change impacts, think about the sea level rise and its associated saline water intrusion. Think about a sudden onset event like cyclones. That due to cyclone or storm surges, our ecology got damaged very frequently. For example, Isla, you think about the Isla. It damaged huge ecological area in the coastal zone. Then there was no technology to restore the ecology. This is a big challenge. Restoration of ecosystem is most important environmental challenges. You need technology, you need of course finance, then the capacity, right expertise. So I'm going to talk about this additionally, particularly. Then I would like to identify the scope of financing to address the ecological loss and damage with some of the current global funding arrangement, like the global community agreed to establish a biodiversity fund last year, and also we agreed to establish a loss and damage fund, which is going to be operationalized this year. And of course, some sort of way forward thoughts I would like to share with the audience. Next slide, please. So already what I said, we do share the watersheds of the Ganges, Brahmaputra and Meghna basin. Now, what are the existing regulations? Ganges Water Treaty. But after that treaty, there was an international convention, that is International Watercourse Law, 1997. That international law is beautiful. That talked about the equitable, fairness and sustainable utilization. Unfortunately, our treaty, which we signed in 1996 with India, that doesn't talk about the equitable share, but accommodative share is there. It means you need to accommodate based on the water availability of the water. But maybe that is the another session they're gonna talk about the Ganges Water Treaty. But my understanding, Ganges Water Treaty is like that. During the monsoon, sluice gate is open. During the dry season, sluice gate is closed. For me, that's the Ganges Water Treaty. Being a lawyer, I can explain different stuffs, but as a layman, that's my understanding. So there is an opportunity. This treaty is going to be over by 2026. Then we need to review this treaty in light of the International Water Law, Watercourse Law 1997. That gave us beautiful principles and ideas how to deal with the transboundary, even regional water management. Then look at the climate change impacts. I talked about the saline water intrusion and sea level rise and sudden onset events. But if you think about the regional context, then you need to think about the glaciers, Himalayan snow. That is the source of the water. Then glacier melting, glacial lakes outburst, lack of water, scarcity of water, overflow of the water. So water is a opportunity, water is the same time a big problem. So you now think about the inland water courses. Very important. Due to water scarcity and pollution and our unsustainable development activities, all inland water bodies are dead now, I'm telling it. I'm working with the vulnerable communities is now 20 years. So I'm telling this, all water bodies are dead water bodies in Bangladesh. Now last session, Sami Appa and others talked about the marine resources. I'm now working on the blue economy. So I'm very interested to find the regional and transboundary solution, a global solution to promote the blue economy with three principles, that is protection, conservation, and then promotion. Being an environmental lawyer, for me, conservation and protection is the highest priority, then the promotion. That must be sustainable promotion. Anyway, that's not my topic. Then can you go please next slide? So I already talked about these treaties, Ganges Water Treaty, regional. Now my idea, we really need a regional environmental treaty within the SHARC countries. That's a good idea. Then under this treaty, there must be some clear short-term, mid-term, and long-term plans and programs. You know, loss and damage fund that we established last year, operationalized this year. To access that, I'll talk about that later, but to access that fund, you need to take the programmatic approach. But I don't know how, as a region, we can develop a program and access those funds. Not only the loss and damage fund, I'm telling the CBD fund is also very important. Then financial mechanism, not only donor-based, maybe within the country, we need to develop internal financing system that can be aided by the bilateral or development or regional funds, global funds access. But important, we need to develop financial mechanisms, how to contribute, how to access, and how to disburse. Very critical, innovative governance mechanism we need to develop. But we can learn from international practices. There are some practices, regional level, also global level. We can learn from them, but it's possible. Finally, my specific recommendation, there is a platform that is called Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal that basically focus on the communication. I don't know why communication is so important, but it's important, of course. But for me, being an environmental lawyer, of course, environment is the highest priority. Climate change is the highest priority. So it can be a forum, but SHARC, Imtiaz is here, maybe he will talk about this more. I don't know why the SHARC is not so effectively functional. So it needs to be functional. Then we can think about the platform that could be functional. It's critical, right? For example, we do face monsoon floods or flash floods every year. Then early warning system is very important. Data, oh, that's very important. Finally, insurance. Last session also, I heard some of our colleagues talked about the insurance. I'm not an insurance advocate at all. However, I would like to experiment. Premium is a big challenge. Our vulnerable communities cannot provide the premium. An insurer, that's a private company, business entity. Without right premium, they would not going to be involved with these insurance processes. But still we can find the scope, how to utilize this insurance mechanism. We need further research. Next slide, please. Now, I said we need to learn from the global practices, regional practices. Now I'm going to show a beautiful practice at the global level, how to deal with the loss and damage. There is a complete institutional framework established under UNFCCC. And Professor Salim, who contributed a lot, this is the chart or infograph that is developed by last decade. Professor Salim and myself, we worked very hard, continuously last 12 years, a decade, to develop this framework. For these 12 years decisions, I know every comma, I know every full stop, I know the diplomacy, I know the politics, guided by Professor Salim. So it's my great honor to recall Salim in this session. So basically there is a Warsaw International Mechanism. That's an international mechanism. when we established this mechanism, we did not understand what is the international mechanism, what would be the structure and what would be the function. Then Salim invited all the developing country negotiators, 27 negotiators from G77 China, and 10 academics, experts. We went to Italy, Bellagio, just before the COP. We spent together 7 days. We tried to architect the institutional structure and what would be the function. We spent 7 days and we went to Warsaw on the same flight. It was like a mission. And Salim started to advocate to name this mechanism as the international Warsaw. I was asking, sir, why you are thinking this? He said, this is the tactics. If you name it with the COP presidency cities, they will be interested. I learned it from Salim. I learned a lot from Salim. He was my guru. This is the international mechanism. It got 2 wings. In Bellagio, we architected a structure mechanism. It must have 3 wings, a policy wing, technical wing, and finally the financial wing. So initially 2014, we got executive committee, that is the policy wing. I'm also a member of this executive committee, that is 20 members from all over the world. Then the Santiago network, we got it at COP25 in Madrid. That is the technical arm. At COP28, we operationalize this technical arm. It's going to be provided or catalyze the technical assistances maybe from the next year. Still, we need to work on some modalities, how to access and disburse the technical assistance. Finally, the fund. I know the colleagues, you might be interested about the fund. Faraba, আমার সময় কতক্ষণ 5 minutes, right? Next slide, please. After 5 minutes? I think. Okay.
We're wrapping up in 5 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. So this is the COP27 decision. We established this fund. It's a very unique fund. Why? Loss and damage, for example, due to cyclone or floods, affected community needs to access the financial and technical resources at the moment. Then how to channel, how to disburse. If you look at the other global funds like Green Climate Fund, all are the project based. You need to develop the project, you need to submit. If it is approved, then you're gonna get the money. But this is not project based. That must be program based. That was the big challenge to establish this fund at COP27. Now let's look at the function of this fund. There was a transitional committee established last year to develop the modalities to operationalize this fund. Colleagues, I'm very happy I was one of the transitional committee members, very short time, but as an advisor throughout the year. Throughout the year, these 48 people, we worked very hard. 5 meetings, 3 workshops, 4 dialogues, and we produced 39 technical papers. Finally, we made some recommendation for COP28. And you know all the victory. The COP presidency played a very important diplomatic role. They wanted to adopt this decision at the outset of the COP. It means open plenary. Then COP presidency started to talk with the different groups, G77 China, AOCs, LDCs. 1 month before the COP, they talked with all the groups and we agreed that would be a great idea. And very interestingly, COP presidency, you know, that's the developing country. That's fun. I don't know why. Still, Arab Emirates, Imtiaz knows better than me. Arab Emirates still are developing country. This is the first time our developing country made a pledge for this fund. So that's also a dimension for climate diplomacy. Colleagues, you know, who polluted yesterday, they are responsible today based on their historical responsibility. And who are polluting today, they're gonna responsible tomorrow based on their historical responsibility. So this is the time like Arab Emirates should come forward and to take some not only protective measures, also facilitative efforts for developing countries. Next slide, please. basically what at COP28,
Will you stay at the conceptual level because I think we are
yeah,
getting short.
well, just 30 seconds. Okay. So we established this fund. Now how to access? Maybe this is my last slide. So in this fund, community can access directly from this fund. Now, if we think about the Bangladesh level, government should develop their capacity with their preparedness so that they can access this fund. At the same time, communities since can access this fund directly, we civil societies really can support the vulnerable communities how they can access this fund directly. At the same time, we can also develop some ideas how as a region we can develop some sort of programs for natural resource management, not only water, and how to access this fund. So this is the time to prepare ourselves to access this fund, not only this fund, also biodiversity fund. I would like to stop here. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khan. Since he is leaving, I will have the question and answer for him. We have 5 minutes. If you raise the questions, he'll answer directly. We'll take it in one bunch as he has to leave and go somewhere else. Thank you.
Sir, you have presented a fantastic presentation on the sanitization in the Ganges Brahmaputra Delta, a planetary health perspective. So I ask a question to you. The real scenario of this area, the Ganges Brahmaputra Delta, the Choranchal, that's we call. So what kind of you think that in the monsoons rainy season, the 90% of that area actually are submerged every year, and that's a huge sanitization nightmare for the inhabitants. As we see it practically, if we go there, we can see it. So what kind of nightmare, what kind of worst situation for the female, and especially for the female. So my question is that you are a scientist. So oh, achha.
Yeah. Sir, I have a question for you.
I guess everyone can hear me. I have pretty loud voice. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Let's say I have a company, XYZ, and it's dumping pollutants in the water. And as a lawyer, environmental lawyer, you complained a case against me, you own the case, I have given a fine, a huge amount of fine, I have paid the fine. But a big company that keep dumping stuffs in the stagnant water, and it keeps polluting the water no matter what. Sir, I want to know who are the people who actually get down in the water and clean up the water, clean the pollutants out, and what are we doing about them? So thank you.
Well, I don't want to dampen your enthusiasm. I see you are hyper positivist. The regional solution that you have given is not going to happen. SARC has reached, it's dead, let's face it. It's not going to leave. And given the point that Narendra Modi is going to come to power for another 5 years, it's not going to happen, let's face it, BBIN has not really worked. The reason I say that it has become been because Bhutan refused to sign the Auto Act. Now, "been" is an interesting word in English, you know. So that also has, reached a point where I think it's not going to work. I think somehow you need to bring, again, I go back to politics, that politicians' compulsion, and this is what I think Sabarbai was pointing out also, their compulsions is great. And somehow we human beings, we think that humans are rational. It's not. Because there are compulsions. We are motivated, rational being. Our reasoning is motivated. So you need to bring that. Otherwise, what will happen is that you are going to give this scenario that, we are going to solve the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. You have already come to COP28. Look at it. It's going to become, I can bet, COP 2800, and you will not be able to solve it. So we need to come out of that. Otherwise, people giving the vision, but it's not going to work. And Salim Bhai is no longer here, but it will be interesting to see. And if you look at his work, it's still, we are in zero. Because if you remember the figure that I say, by 2050, it's $1 trillion you need. We have not even reached not even 1 billion. So I think we need to come out of that. And since you are familiar with all the COPs so far, maybe a discussion of people who are thinking totally in a different ways and interacting with them. Because Afsan Bhai started by saying about the corruption in climate change money. If that is, and you can't throw away corruption, it's there. We can say lovely words, or stop the corruption. You can't do it. In capitalism, corruption is part of capitalism. Let's put it that way. So I would, I understand, I see your, enthusiasm, your hyper, as I said, hyper positivist element, but I think let's have a discourse and let's see whether you are ready to face people who would see it differently. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for the presentation. Echoing with Imtiaz sir, that I'm not so much positivist about this loss and damage fund, but as you sir are with this process very long, like loss and damage fund, are you working with this fund very long time? So I would like to know that will it be a conundrum, like another conundrum like the adaptation fund? If yes, then why? If no, then why? I'm Dr. Sufia Khanum. I work as a senior research fellow at BIISS, Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies. Thank you.
Hello. So my question is very much from a researcher perspective. I trying to link up loss and damage to this ecological loss and biodiversity. Are there tools or research methods that are being developed or exist to link? Because we do a lot of work on ecosystem services, loss of ecosystem services based on different threats and drivers, but then linking that up with attribution science and this. Is there something that you would suggest that can guide us researchers on taking this forward, on filling the gaps on the knowledge to link these issues up?
I'll take the reverse approach. I'll respond to the last questions. Yes, Appa, that is I talked of the executive committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism. They are working with 5 expert groups. At this moment, we are developing 3 technical tools or guides to assess the loss and damage, particularly within the context of comprehensive risk assessment. So still challenge is there. If the global community develop methods, that would be globally standard method that needs to be translated, taking into consideration your country's circumstances. And you, professor, are there. You need to build up your expertise, quickly translate and start the assessment. Thank you. And the second question is, you're not optimistic about the loss and damage fund. Me too. But you know, this is an achievement. You know, why loss and damage is very sensitive diplomatically. Why? It means compensation and liability. The polluted countries should pay you, but it's not so easy to get money from others' pocket, right? But you think about, we established this fund. This is a moral achievement. They acknowledged that loss and damage is there. They made some places. This is a moral achievement. But to make them compel is not so easy. You cannot compel India to give you the water with your fair share. So you cannot compel US to pay money based on their historical responsibilities. But Imtiaz sir, I'm really optimistic. The legal community is now very active. You look at the current litigations, right? I talked about the ICJ. Then you think about the Netherlands case, Germany case. There are so many cases. They are trying to compel their national governments to take measures to reduce their emissions, also to pay for their historical contribution. Now I'm also thinking a case against a multinational company that one of my colleagues was talking. That is the perspective of climate impacts. But your question is particularly water pollution by a company, right? For example, a company based in India, they are polluting water, river, that polluted water is coming to Bangladesh and going to finally Sundarban. So now challenge is, what would be the legal avenues where to file this case? Indian government should Indian citizen can file a case within the Indian jurisdiction. Bangladeshi citizen cannot file a case in India to make responsible that polluter company. There are so many legal complexities are there, but still I do appreciate legal communities are working. Finally, in response to Imtiaz sir, actually, okay. Sir, actually, Professor Salim started to work on loss and damage. It is now 14 years back. And he was the captain. I was the soldier from Bangladesh. Now Sabir Bhai is the... Yeah, Farah also. Yeah, yeah. Farah, myself, and some other colleagues, we were the soldier. And now the new captain on the ship is the Sabir Bhai. He contributed a lot at COP27, also COP28. I worked with him very closely. We spent night together. So we got a new captain. Sir, I'm really optimistic because I worked with Salim 12 years. We made it. Yeah. And then now we are going to work with Sarwar Singh Chaudhary, a dynamic new minister. So I'm really optimistic. For my youth colleagues here, we need to be optimistic. Look, everything is possible. But my friend, the youth, you are going to attend the COP28. Some of you may be frustrated. You need to attend the COP effectively. Effective participation is very important. This is Farapa, it's your responsibility. Before nominating the youth delegates, sending them to prepare them what to do over there. So that's my last comment. And yeah, that is also climate change. So last question, Professor, we need to address the current crisis with innovative governance approach. At the same time, we need to be much more innovative how to deal with the climate impacts. And regional collaboration is very important. So we need to make national strategies, then we can engage other countries in this region. So we can do it. Thank you so much for hearing me.
I fully understand what Professor Imtiaz is saying, but it took 28 COPs to get the international community in the Annex 1 developed countries to come this far. You would not have had any conversation. There's no other platform where you can hold them accountable. There is no other space where they're willing to talk about their environmental responsibility, ecological responsibility. I am not naive. I know that more than $3 trillion as subsidies have gone to the fossil fuel companies. But this is the information that enables us to hold them accountable. You do impact assessment studies now. You have adaptation funding now. You do have Green Climate Fund now. The donors are changing their policy and talking about climate change. How effective it is, does it achieve, have they moved away from fossil fuel? That's not going to happen overnight. As you yourself said, it is driven by development and growth and profit. So unless we can come up with something that is more profitable, but if you cut short these processes of dialogue, conversation, and what we have done so far, I think there is, where would you take it? I would throw back the question to you, where would you bring these international actors and politicians to sit at a table and have these conversations about their responsibility, about their accountability, about compensation, and liability. So loss and damage fund, we are fully aware. A football player from Bahrain is paid more than $800 million. So it is a political priority or how the states perceive. So that fight has not ended. We shall keep the advocacy going.
Thank you so much. Very interesting and also important for people to reflect upon it. These structure is there, and the structures can be used. Have we used them? The point which Imtiaz is making is that what's your pressure? Why will it work? Now, having operated a bit at the international level on climate change, I think the pressure point is what is missing. We have not yet developed the pressure point system. So Modi does not owe you anything. It's unpleasant to think, but it is true. We need to get ready for the bad news. The bad news is not everyone is going to survive. And even if you talk about Bangladesh, and if you calculate Ansar's data, 1200 per square kilometer, don't be shocked if it is thousands, it will go down to 1,000. You need to face it. We don't face it. We are positive. Optimism is a better word rather than to believe in a future. I think optimism means working. But right now, the focus is not just law, because law is at the superstructure level. It is at the level of the policymakers. And I do not believe the policymakers will be serious unless they feel threatened. So at some point of time, I was in favor of climate terrorism. But we can't be in favor of climate terrorism. But the point is, what's going to put pressure on the West to act? What's going to be the pressure on which Modi will act? We still haven't discussed that. Sometimes we do not think that's a legitimate area of discussion. But all the options need to be. So thank you very much for raising all these questions. We are empowered and enlightened. Let's hope we can hit where it matters. Thank you. Yes, please. Okay, thank you. We now go to the second part. And Mohammad Mofizur Rahman, scientist, Potsdam Institute for Climate Change Research, and he will discuss salinization in the Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta, a planetary health perspective. Mr. Rahman, thank you.
Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, speak in brief in Germany. I actually do research on something very weird and different, very controversial, climate engineering. In the mic. I don't Okay, then I stand here. Okay, so I do research on climate engineering, which is very controversial topic, but at the same time, I also run a network of salinity researchers in Europe. So that's why I'm very interested on salinity. And since the morning, almost every speaker is talking about salinization is a climatic problem. It has some sort of connection with climate. So I might disappoint some of you because I have different view on this interesting topic and popular topic. So water, to me, a messenger. It always brings bad news of climate change to the people everywhere. And salinity is one of the bad news is brought by water. And so if you look at iron problem in the water, water's color of the water tells you that there is something wrong. Also arsenic is brought by water and so on. And if you also look at flood and cyclone, it's just different flow, different velocity of water. So water tells a lot about a lot of climatic manifestation. So salinity is an interesting topic in the context of water, river, and climate change. It connects all three. So the most famous book I came across and I really enjoyed a lot is by Mark Krunowski. So he said salt is essential for life and it's also essential for society. If you look at historical evidence in many cities, they made their fortune by selling rock salts and other. But in current time, many cities in coastal areas, in deltas, and also in arid and semi-arid areas, salt become a curse. And the way I define salinization is the accumulation of salt both in soil and in water. It includes both surface water, groundwater, and other things. So we need to understand the character of salinization as a problem, then we will have a different perspective, because salinity is a very slow process. It's a creeping process. It's very silent. It's not like flood or cyclone. It's not coming at once. It's not like a flood. When flood comes, everybody get a notice. But salt, when it's penetrates beneath the soil, it's so silent. You can't see it, you can't hear it. It's also hidden, and it's very seasonal. So if you go monsoon time, a lot of aquifers and a lot of rivers become fresh. So it's not all the year round. And salinity is also a problem which faced by marginalized people. In Dhaka, you don't see, or if you go to big cities, it's not a big problem, but it's mostly on the coast. And the people have less resources, and they're poor and kind of vulnerable. So these are interesting feature of salinization. That's why it's never been addressed the way we address cyclone or flood and other kind of disaster. Then we have to look at also the drivers, what drives salinity. It's not only climate. So very often I look at literature. So let me tell you a little background. So I published a paper in Journal of Water Security where I summarized kind of 100 papers been published worldwide in different river deltas. And very many papers have titled that climate-induced salinity, which is academically very disappointing to me, because it's not only climate which have connection with salinization, there are other factors. So there are global drivers, there are regional drivers, there are local drivers. So the way we withdraw water for agriculture also contribute, the way we make dams upstream also contribute to salinity. And so from the literature, I came up with many causes of salinization. It's the sea level rise, the saltwater intrusion, reduced freshwater flow. And on the other side, if you look at tectonic activities in Himalaya, Himalaya is a very relatively recent mountain, and it's still evolving, it's rising. So if Himalaya rise, the other part of the tectonic plate also submerge. That also contribute, but if you look at popular discussion, nobody talk about these geological forces. Nobody talks about these natural forces. Everybody talks about climatic connection. But of course, climate plays a role, but in different time scale. And very often we forget other drivers, which is essential to design solution. Then I looked at the consequences. What are the consequences of salinization? So there are a lot of literature from Bangladesh as looking at health consequences. For example, preeclampsia, eclampsia, pregnancy outcome, kidney functionality, and so on. But very often we think that's the whole picture. That's just the tip of the iceberg, because there is no study looked at human physiology. It's only look at ecological process. So the hypertension is not really a disease. It's something triggers other disease. So we need more and more study, because salinity might be affecting our body way more harmful way than we know so far. That will be really useful. Yeah. So exactly. Exactly. But no, we need to fight for it. Thank you. I'm giving a presentation after many months, so I'm a bit nervous, but it's fine. So salinity, so far in Bangladesh, there are a lot of study on agriculture, impact of salinity on agriculture, because rice cannot grow well after 6 deciments of salt, but many coastal areas have way more salinity than like above 6 deciments. So people are going to different crops and so on. So I don't want to go in detail what consequences salinity have, because all of you know already. Then I go to, yeah, this is an interesting story. I want to spend 2-3 minutes here, then I'm done. So for this study, I have measured salinity from the tube well. So on the y-axis, it's mostly measurement of salinity from tube well. So 3,000 tube well, we measured the salinity, the actual salinity. Then on the x-axis, we ask people, how do they perceive salinity? And it's so interesting to me, even though people are drinking highly salty water, but when you ask them, they say no, it's good water. And that really makes me confused, because people forget or somehow misleaded. They cannot perceive the actual salinity in many coastal villages. And I start digging little detail why. And there are a lot of biomedical research now looking at the taste bud of human tongue is getting changed, because years after years they keep drinking salty water, and now they don't really know it's really salty or fresh water, because they set up a new threshold. So that's the story I'm writing my next paper. It's called social tipping point. So it's not the tipping point set up by biophysical process of the nature, it's the tipping point set up human psychology and the human behavior and the human practice. Because WHO have a recommendation, so this is the salinity you should drink. But when you go in reality, the people find it very, water is not tasty if it is not saline. So I look at the way they eat rice with watery rice. They put a lot of salt, otherwise they don't really feel any taste. So the whole culture of eating habit and drinking habit been changed, because last 20-30 years people keep drinking heavy salty water. So that's why I'm defining in my paper salinity is a planetary health problem, because it's threatening the health of the planet by making the soil salty, but at the same time it's threatening the human health. So in combination we can call it's a planetary health threat. And I want to finish by saying one sentence, that we should stop saying climate-induced salinity, that's actually academically little biased, and I have problem with that. Thank you very much. I will stop here, and you can ask me any question.
Thank you. The floor is open for questions. We'll put them all one question and then take as a cluster.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation, such a short and sweet and very deep message through it. How we internalize the problem itself. So the problem does not exist at all. So my question to you is then, how do we now make it unproblem? You know, I mean, that's my concern, which is also your concern, that if it is now if it is internalized, how do we now basically make it an externality back again into the system, because health is at stake. When we are talking about all climate issues, eventually we are talking about well-being. And another thing probably you may know in your circle, but not part of your studies, are other creatures on land are equally affected as humans? Because I'm often concerned, honestly speaking, I'm no more concerned about humans, because I strongly feel that if we don't exist, the planet exists.
True.
So sorry about this pessimism, but I'm more concerned. If you know people, I would like to get in touch with them. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in the same philosophy as you, that without human being, this planet will go on. But so the other study I know so far is about fish. So fish is having a lot of trouble with extreme salt, because they always have to kind of, when they take salty water through their gills, they have to get rid of some of the salt and some physiological process. So they're also having difficulties of the growth and reproduction and so on. I know certain insects been studied in mesocosm in laboratory environment, but I don't know in an ecological setting. I know about mangroves, so a lot of people are studying mangrove species. Certain species require certain amount of salt, but certain species doesn't really need it. So the species composition is changing, and also there are studies looking at how they're moving, because plant also move, and this is something very difficult to explain sometimes in who does not know plant physiology and plant ecosystem very well. So these are the things I know so far about solution. So this is, I'm also very interested, because a lot of solution been discussed, but what I believe, we cannot get rid of salinity, because the way it's been developed, there is no way we can get rid of. Somehow either we need to adapt with it, or we have to find out alternative water storage, water source, and like kind of water system. Or a lot of people are talking about kind of agricultural adjustment. People call it climate smart agriculture and so on. So there are a lot of ways, but to be very honest, I haven't studied much about solution. Still looking at the problem itself. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to disagree with, about these human beings and, whether the earth can exist without human beings. There was an interesting debate in 1930 between Tagore and Einstein. Einstein is a physicist and Tagore, as you know, a mystic poet. And they were debating on a very simple question. And the question was, can there be beauty, truth, the table, and by implication, the moon without human beings? Tagore, a mystic poet, emphatically said no. No human beings, no beauty, no truth, no table, nothing. Okay? Because you need human beings to say that you exist. Nothing would exist without human beings. An ant is not going to come and say to Afsan Bhai, you exist. It's only another human beings who can say. So no human beings, no. But then the point that I'm just trying to point out, that's not the way to. We can't go that way. But coming back to salt, don't forget, salt is what made the British leave India. It was the salt movement by Gandhi which changed dramatically the politics of what you call nationalism and all, because that was the long salt march, which mobilized people, and Gandhi knew that his non-violence would succeed in throwing away the British. So salt is an interesting, from the point of view of politics, is an important. But let's go back to salt and sugar, because we need to bring the other side of the sugar. You know, more people die of diabetes than in war. More people die of diabetes than in terrorism. But the money put to counter terrorism is 500 times more than in diabetes. So the issue that, you know, one has to look into the salt also. Why we have a table salt? There's no need for table salt, but every item would have salt. And there are people who don't use table salt, but then we keep on table salt. And then if you are in McDonald's, you love to put in the French fry, you know, the salt. It doesn't go without that. So I think I go back to the point that you're mentioning that in some areas in Bangladesh, it has become a new level of taking salt. I think that's one way of looking into it, that how much people can consume salt and live by that, to create a different threshold altogether. So I was just saying that whether it's an issue of salt or the issue of human beings' habit of having salt, you know, because we are blaming something, the poor fellow is always there, you know. So I was thinking whether it's human beings who is responsible. I don't think it's a problem with the cats and dogs, you know, having salt, because they're not into it, other beings, but it's only humans. So I was thinking whether if humans can change their habit of taking salt, that's a far better way to resolve the problem. That's
Thank you, sir.
Just 1 second.
Yeah.
We are taking the last question. We're riding over time. And then we are entering the lunch break. We have already entered the lunch break, so I won't keep you there. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir. When I was doing field work in the coast, I found a lot of people are stuck into kind of inertia, kind of moving beyond it. It's so difficult because they're kind of locked in a system. It's kind of a practice over the time, and they don't have much resource or knowledge to break it. So I think this is one problem. And the second problem in the coast, a lot of people are hypertensive, but they never screened it. Like there was never been a screening process. So only people have other disease go to the hospital, then doctor measure your blood pressure. But you might have a blood pressure already, but you never cared in your entire life because there was no reason for that. Okay, so I got a question. It says there are salinity in ponds which is very far away from the coast. And that's actually my point. So a lot of people when say it's a climate induced problem, of course in the coast I understand it because of sea level rise and other process, but exactly this is my point. So when it's far more inland, somewhere in Jessore or somewhere very far from the coast have salinity problem, but that has a very different process and mechanism, bit different from climate. So, and you asked me for a solution, and to be very honest, I don't know much about solution, but I see people are going for rainwater harvesting and kind of village-based pond system and so on and so forth. People are trying very many ways. As limited resource they have, they try their best. Yeah, that's what I can say. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And the session is ending here. Lunch is going to be served, and you can discuss and carry on this issue. My final remarks are, something which is very interesting. Again, Imtiaz brought this up. You are not spending money on diabetes management. You are spending money on counterterrorism, and I think both of us have worked in that sector, so we know how much. So essentially, the point which Imtiaz made earlier is also valid right now for this section also. It's your political self-perception of who your enemy is and where you need to put the money that is deciding your policies. So absolutely isolated, take care of the climate police policy, I don't think really has a future. And we need to go bigger in our thinking. It is beyond science, it is beyond law, beyond everything. It is probably a holistic view. And by that we mean taking in all the effects. So if when I mention climate terrorism and everyone is shocked, the point is you are going to produce those issues. You are going to produce them, whether you like it or not. The other option is what some of the scientists have said, and I met them at MIT, was saying every species has a time, and we are reaching the end of time. So if you want to expand a little bit more, you better take care of politics as well. Thank you very much.
Heartfelt thanks to the moderator and the panelists for the inspiring presentation, and your commitment to the topics discussed is truly commendable. So ladies and gentlemen, now we break for lunch. Kindly enjoy your meals outside this room, and we look forward to reconvening for the afternoon session. So promptly see you all at 2 p.m. No? 1:30, sharp. 2:15? All right, so see you all sharp at 2:15 in the same room with the afternoon session. Thank you so much. Enjoy your meal.